Thank you. And before we begin our last panel session, I wanted to take a moment and recognize the work of Senator Maria Cantwell, who was the other half of our National Public Service Award winner this year. Senator Cantwell is busy in the Senate. They have important Senate budget resolution votes that came up today, and she very much regrets that she couldn't be here for the session. She's been very involved and is passionate about this issue. So I'll tell you a little bit about the Honorable Maria Cantwell, my senator in the state of Washington. Senator Cantwell has been one of the most active voices in Congress regarding the overhaul of college sports. As a leader on the Senate Commerce Committee, Senator Cantwell has spearheaded a multi-front legislative effort to transform the landscape for college athletes with the primary focus of balancing massive revenue growth with athlete welfare. Key actions include the Student Athlete Fairness and Enforcement, the SAFE Act, which mandates 10-year scholarship guarantees and long-term medical coverage for injuries, and helping undergraduate students thrive with long-term earnings, also known as the HUSTLE Act, which regulates NIL agents. In August of 2025, she sent a pivotal letter to over 350 university presidents, warning them against supporting legislation that would roll back athlete protections. Most recently, she introduced the College Sports Competitive Act of 2026, a bipartisan effort to allow conferences to pool media rights. This move aims to generate nearly $9 billion in revenue to save non-revenue and Olympic sports from being cut. Throughout these efforts, Senator Cantwell has utilized GAO reports to expose the lack of transparency and how universities distribute their record-breaking media profits. Senator Cantwell deserves the Public Service Award for her tireless advocacy in centering the rights of college athletes within a rapidly commercialized industry. Her commitment to a bipartisan approach, evidenced by her collaboration with both Democrats and Republicans, demonstrates a pragmatic dedication to seeking a durable federal solution that ensures the long-term stability and fairness of college sports for all institutions. So we thank Senator Cantwell, and we hope to present that award to her very soon in person. I'd like to begin with our final session of the day. Pleased to introduce our panel. We originally had Sally Jenkins, formerly of the Washington Post, now with the Atlantic, who had a scheduling conflict, is unable to attend today. So we are blessed to have Kevin Blackistone, also formerly of Washington Post, and he is pinch hitting here. So he's been an award-winning national sports columnist since 1990, now contributing to MS Now, formerly of the Washington Post, also AOL Fan House and the Dallas Morning News. He is a professor of practice at the Philip Merrill College of Journalism at the University of Maryland. I obviously am not introducing Senator Cantwell, so we have pinch hitting for Senator Cantwell, also the Honorable Tom McMillan. And I don't have a bio in front of me, but what I recall about Tom is he's done many things. Tom is a former Rhodes Scholar, a former elite college athlete, a former Olympic gold medal basketball player, a former NBA player, and former congressman, and now on the Board of Regents of the University of Maryland. How did I do, Tom? We have to Tom's left Dr. Wayne Frederick, interim president of Howard University. Dr. Frederick currently serves as the interim president of Howard University, having previously led the institution as its 17th president from 2014 to 2023. To Dr. Frederick's left is Dr. E. Gordon Gee, President Emeritus, West Virginia University. Dr. Gee is a prominent figure in American higher education, having spent more than 40 years in leadership roles, including 2 tenures as the president of West Virginia University and the Ohio State University. His extensive administrative career also includes presidencies at Vanderbilt University, Brown University, and the University of Colorado, earning him the recognition from Time magazine as one of the nation's top university leaders. To his left is Oliver Luck. Oliver provides leadership experience spanning collegiate and professional athletics in the United States and Europe. He currently serves as the chairman of Clemson Ventures and as a member of the Board of Governors of West Virginia University. It's all yours, Mr. Blackistone.
Thank you very much, Julie. Before I start, I usually do a land acknowledgement. I won't do one here, but I will acknowledge this coming off the last panel. This is Howard University, you know, for those of you who don't. It's an HBCU, and this is ground zero in a lot of ways for athletes' protests for more freedom. 1936, Howard University football players went on strike against the university, refusing to play a game against, I think it was Virginia Union, because they wanted better treatment in terms of food. They did the same thing again in 1968, did the same thing again in 1981, I believe it was, when they boycotted the athletic banquet here because they wanted better treatment from the administration. So I just want to acknowledge the fact that when we talk about athlete freedoms in the college context, that we acknowledge the role that Howard University athletes have played there. So this is a real pleasure to be on this panel with all of these folks. Dr. Frederick is the only one who I've not dealt with before. Tom McMillan, I've known for a very long time. Gordon G., I remember when you shut down the athletic department at Vanderbilt University and caused all sorts of consternation across the country. And I've known Oliver Luck since you were building the infrastructure, the professional sports infrastructure in the city of Houston many years ago. So I guess the first thing I'd ask, just coming off of this last panel and the description about this panel being exploring whether new regulatory frameworks can stabilize a system currently navigating unprecedented volatility. And it strikes me, in going back to thinking about the freedoms that athletes have gained in just the past few years, that now it's being described as being out of control. And that for some reason and some way, we have to get control of this athletic landscape again. Am I wrong there, Tom?
No, we've had this debate for some time. I mean, the truth of the matter is college sports has a lot of problems. It has a spending problem. It has a revenue problem. It has a lot of issues. And I don't think student athletes being empowered is the major problem. The fact of the matter is that over time, we have had this system where one side really won, which is coaches primarily, and the other side was really left behind. When I was in Congress, we had a hearing, and we were approaching the first $1 million football coach. And I remember saying to them at the time that, you know, if we go here, we're going to have $1 million player pretty soon. Well, unfortunately, it took us 30 years to get there, but the system has to be balanced, but it has to be under control. This is higher ed after all, and we're the only nation in the world, that has tried this novel experiment of putting high-powered sports with education together. So you need some controls, you need some regulation, but it has to be balanced.
And Gordon, is this a time for us to maybe shut down athletics as we know it and start anew as you did at Vanderbilt?
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that, a reminder of one of my many follies. But, you know, what I did at Vanderbilt was to just say we need to rethink and restart. And I believe that that's where we are right now in college athletes. It's a mess. Let's just call it what it is. It's a mess. We have lost the court cases. You know, Judge Wilkin has become the administrator of college athletics in many ways, the judge out of San Francisco. But I think also there's a reality. I call myself the poster boy of bad behavior because, as a university president, I think that what we did is we really gave up control as presidents of the athletic enterprise. We created these powerful commissioners, we created these powerful athletic directors, we created these powerful coaches, and we paid them just lots of money. And we never did think about the student athlete in all of this process. And I think that the structural issues that we're trying to figure out right now is how do we structure a collegiate system in which the academic and athletic programs are controlled by the people who actually run the university.
And Dr. Frederick, I'm going to come back to you last, but I just want to ask Oliver Luck, given your experience in NCAA, given your experience at West Virginia, how do you see the situation we're in right now, and what would you point to as something we need to correct?
So I would maybe take a little bit of a different approach. In a real sense, I think college athletics at the top level, big-time college football or big-time college basketball, we've been a victim in a sense of our own success. This is a hugely popular entertainment pastime for literally tens of millions of people. So that success has put a lot of money into the system, and right now we're in this sort of interregnum. We're operating a multi-billion-dollar business based on a legal settlement, 10-year settlement. We're 1 year in, 9 more years to go. Many people would say we've hit rock bottom, but like good West Virginia coal miners, we're digging even deeper. So we have to figure out, starting soon, what this next era looks like, because it's going to take a number of years to put that into play. So I think the competition, the entertainment value is better than ever. I think that the value system that athletes come away with after 4 years, 5 years, whatever number of years in college is great. That hasn't changed. Same thing with Tom and his basketball and me with my football experience in college. But there clearly isn't a formalized system, and that needs to include student athletes. It needs to include the players, collegiate players, call it whatever you will. They're a key part of the value chain, and the fact that they weren't compensated going back is wrong, simply wrong. So, but I'm not sure anybody would agree that it's a good system right now. And the settlement, quite honestly, is almost fundamentally flawed because it was put together fairly quickly. It's the new NCAA rule book, and it took years and years and years, and this isn't a compliment, but it took years and years and committees to put the NCAA rule book together. We don't have that right now. So it's a big question mark.
And Dr. Frederick, I wanted to hold you till last because, as I mentioned earlier, I really want to acknowledge the role that Howard University athletes have played in athlete empowerment in college. And I think one of the things that gets overlooked in this conversation, I like to bring up whenever I have a chance, is the role that young black men play in this entire system. And I see this as a need to correct what is a racial injustice and a social injustice, because I think we have to point out that black men are disproportionate and predominant when it comes to the two sports, football and men's basketball, that bring in the bulk of the revenue into this system. How do you acknowledge that, and what role or how do you think that should be rectified and acknowledged?
Yeah. Well, so first thing, let me welcome all of you to Howard University. It's an honor to have you on this campus today, and I certainly admire the work that the Drake Foundation does. I will admit, my perspective of this is significantly different, just to be quite clear. And the one disclosure that I'll put out is that my 21-year-old son, who is now a professional soccer player, went to Duke and played soccer at Duke, and to my surprise, called me October of his sophomore year to say that he thinks MLS was going to change the rules so that they could draft underclassmen, and that a scout was at his game looking at him. And of course, I told him the scout wasn't there for him, and as they say, the rest is history. 2 months later, he's drafted number 2 in the draft, and he's playing professional soccer, and he is a black young man, which I'm very concerned about how he navigates society. Howard is a unique enterprise, and I think the first thing I would say is this discussion we have is skewed by basketball and football, and I think oftentimes when we have this conversation, we don't acknowledge that. The greater number of athletes in college sports do not play basketball or football. So let's first start by doing that. As a matter of fact, we are currently looking at putting out some information on data on our tennis team, our swimming team, et cetera. Why? Because we have a disproportionate number of black athletes who played tennis here at Howard who have become physicians. It's almost like there's something going on that tennis court that I need to figure out what's going on there. Same thing in several of the other sports that we refer to as Olympic sports. So the first thing I think that really imbalances the conversation, to be quite honest, Mr. Blackstone, is that I think we take what is, as Mr. Luck was saying, the big behemoth in the room of college football in particular, and we then try to strip away the pieces for all the other things that are happening. I think that that's the first mistake. If there's an injustice to all athletes, I think that's the first mistake that we make. We are building a system around one major sport, probably two, and we're trying to apply it to everybody. That's the first thing I would say. The second thing is, because of the skewed experience we have here at Howard, we know that it can work for the student athlete to benefit from the original intent, and that is to come and get an education, to participate in a disciplined environment that actually adds to your success. And if you speak to any successful business who hires young people, whether out of college or a little later on, they love athletes because of the sacrifices athletes make, the discipline they develop, etc. And unfortunately, we allowed that situation to get away from us during a period of time. And to be quite honest, it was skewed around basketball and football. So to get directly to your last point, so I do believe that we needed to correct the system. I do believe that the system needed some control, to be quite honest. But that control should not have been about controlling the athletes. It should have been about empowering them. And the system now is using money as a surrogate for that empowerment, which I also think is a mistake. Most athletes, post-athletic career in college, really fail and struggle in their 30s and 40s. And personally, again, if I had an opportunity to redo this, I would not pay athletes while they're in college, but rather I would have them get annuities that they can then put to use when they're 35, 40, 45, probably in the age zone where they struggle the most and probably need the most help. Paying athletes is just a surrogate for that empowerment. The real empowerment should be that we should be presenting them with opportunities, data that they can use to go on to lead successful lives beyond the time where they would have the issues that would really then matter. So they can become congressmen, etc. And this system is not going to achieve that, right? So let me put that. So that injustice you're speaking about, I actually worry that it's actually going to get worse because there's less interest. I won't name the player, but I'll close on this note. A college football player who applied for his 6th team for one more transfer was asked, all these schools you've attended, how is that education going? How are you getting a chance to spend time in class and really get a coherent education? And his response to that question was simply school, like with a question mark. So the college part of this is really being ignored for what it should be. And I think the conversation that worries me, that we have now used money to empower them, and I don't think that that's really the empowerment. If we want to empower them, we should be thinking of their health. We should be thinking of them holistically in terms of how are they going to contribute to our society, and most importantly, how are they going to thrive in the society. So all of the skills they need to do that, they still need to get from somewhere, and the money that we're throwing in NIL is not going to do that.
And we actually don't even know how much money is in NIL until some enterprising reporter gets a 1099 form leaked to them from somebody in the IRS, right? But you suggest something there that maybe the mission of college athletics now, particularly for those two very large sports, is for those athletes to be able to maximize what is really their greatest window of opportunity to turn their athleticism into income. Because we know that the graph for making it from high school to college and then from college to the pros really falls off precipitously. So, Oliver, how do we, is that the right viewpoint? And if it isn't, what is the right viewpoint? And how do we go about recognizing the sacrifices that young athletes make with their eye on the prize being making money?
That's obviously a very, I may want to disagree a bit with President Frederick. I do think to a certain degree money is empowerment. It's the currency, no pun intended, by which we all live, and certainly how this nation operates. I would also strongly say that education is empowerment, and that's hugely important in the long run. How do you match those, I think, is the real question. But, you know, to President Frederick's point, you know, a sixth school for a young man or a young woman seems to me to be simply crazy. It's insane. It has no place really within higher education.
You said this is college's problem that they kind of created for themselves, right?
Well, I think that we have to look in the mirror first. I mean, no doubt about it. And one of the things I will say, I haven't referred to this for a long time, but the reason that I did what I did at Vanderbilt was to do exactly what Dr. Frederick was talking about, to try to empower the student athlete by creating a system in which they are not isolated and in which they're able to participate fully as students as well as athletes. And to some extent, it worked, but you know, Vanderbilt is a unique institution. I'm not certain I could have done that at Ohio State and been successful with that. So I think what we're trying to do here, this is a moment because of all the lawsuits, because of the House settlement. This is a moment in which we're going to have to realize that we have two different kinds of issues. The first issue is we've got a revenue problem, and that is simply something we're going to have to address. The student, university and colleges, in terms of viewership, rank number one in the nation by far. Yet, in terms of revenue production, we rank number 5 or 6. And so that gap is very difficult. And that's one of the reasons why we have had some of these problems. The second thing, though, is we have a structural problem. So we have a revenue problem, we have a structural problem. And the structural problem is how do we put together a structure which allows and empowers the student athletes, which we did not do, but now which would allow us to have a stasis so that we can have students be empowered as we want to have our piccolo players and as we want to have every other type of student. We treated student athletes different from the rest of our students. And that's how we ended up having this kind of bubble mentality that we now have to get out of. And that's the structural issues that I think we're going to have to face. And I agree with Wayne that you know, we really need to be concerned about these students in the long term. What is it, Tom? I think it is that of Division I players, only about 1% ever receive money from the NFL or the NBA, and so what that shows that we've got a false institutional entity going on here.
Well, Tom, how do we then, I guess, once again fix this, or what do we acknowledge about this? Because once again, it seems to me that for the first time, athletes have the freedom to cash in on their athletic celebrity if they can find someone willing to pay for it. They can get a little bit of money from the House settlement, and that's a hard cap at $20 million to be distributed, while Kalen DeBoer today or yesterday got a new contract to coach Alabama football for 7 years, $187 million, no cap on coaches. They have the freedom to move around like any other student on campus. If they don't like this school, they can go to another school without penalty. Those seem to be good things to me. How about to you?
So just a little history for a second. When I was in Congress in 1990, Bill Bradley, myself, and Ed Counts, we passed the first college sports bill. It was pretty simple, requiring universities to disclose the graduation rates of their students and their student athletes. And believe it or not, the NCAA opposed that little simple bill. And after we passed that, I said, you know, my big idea is we need to re-monopolize television in college sports because it got fragmented after an '84 Supreme Court decision. But I want to bring it together in a monopoly tied to fundamental reforms. Giving student athletes a stipend, this is back in 1991. Putting some cost controls on college sports, investing in Olympic sports, investing in Title IX and women's sports. So Senator Cantwell last summer, and I'm honored, by the way, to sit here in her place, we sat last summer and we talked about if you could really raise the revenue pie and tie it to fundamental reforms, that may be your solution. Because as she said, a rising tide will raise a lot of boats. And her legislation right now is bipartisan with Senator Schmidt to do that. And we're not trying to leave the athletes out on this. They need a voice at the table. They need economics in this. But as Dr. Key said, you have a revenue problem in college sports where almost every school is losing money. The University of Maryland's got hundreds of millions of dollars of debt. I'm on the board, so many other universities. This is an unsustainable model. And we got to figure out a way to take care of athletes, to bring down the crazy excesses on spending, to figure out a way to make the pie bigger, and not forget the most important thing of all. These are universities. This is higher ed. And they have to be closely tied to that university. And if we lose that, someday we're going to come back and say, what happened to college sports? So.
Well, the pie has gotten bigger year after year. Every time football or basketball signs a new contract with broadcasters, they make more and more money. How can that be a problem? Isn't the problem managing all that money and spending it equitably and treating and Project 2025 highlighted this. The Trump administration has followed through and highlighted this, and treat revenue-generating athletes like the employees they are of their institutions.
Well, whoops, let me just respond to that very quickly. The problem is this, is the fact that we're eating each other's lunch because we're negotiating against each other all the time. If we amended the Sports Broadcasting Act and included college athletes, and we could negotiate as one, then we would address the revenue problem in large measure, and then that allows us to get to the structural problem. And I think that the two of those parallel each other right now. But you're right. I mean, there's a lot of money going into college athletics, but that money is in many ways because the media folks, they negotiate against each other, and the conferences negotiate against each other. So it really is, we're kind of eating our young all the time.
Well, and just one other small comment on that. How about $250 million for severance payments to coaches that lost, that did not succeed? I mean, on what planet would that occur? And should that be going on in higher ed? That's a question.
Well, you know, I've always wanted to make as much money as my football coach.
But a couple of things. I just want to be clear. When I say we're using money for empowerment, and to your point, more money is going in. I think we should be putting more money towards athletes, but it's not just about putting money in a few people's pockets. And that's what's getting all the attention. My point is, holistically, we should be putting money into their long-term health. There are young people who are going to be getting head injuries, for instance, and we do not have a comprehensive program in college sports to take care of those athletes. We do not have any type of a mechanism to ensure that they're going to be okay. And I hear you, and I hear Oliver as well about the issue of they should be getting paid, they should be empowered. I don't disagree. I'm just saying how we're paying them, what we're paying them for, and the other things we should be putting to wrap around, we should be thoughtful of. And then the other thing I would say is paying them now for 3-4 years when they have another 60 years to live, is not really paying them. Let's just be clear. If you, and that's why I wanted to highlight my tennis players and my swimmers and so on, because when they get a degree, such as, and go and become an ophthalmologist, they're going to get paid 50 years from now. And they're going to live a very good life, a very productive life. They're going to generate generational wealth, etc. So I'm not suggesting that they shouldn't be paid. I'm just saying what we pay them and how we build the infrastructure around all of these athletes is what we should be thinking of. So I agree, as more money comes in. And then the last thing on the coaches, just to be clear, I think in 2024, we had 11 coaches with contracts over $10 million in college football, I think,
Correct.
at the time. I think that's the data. As Gordon said, I would love for that college coach to see how much time he or she would spend for the time that you and I spend. I'd take a piece of that as well. I'm not going to lie to you.
Well, I just want to point out that the National College Players Association has been around now for about 20 years, an effort to unionize college athletes, and their goals really never really included revenue sharing, right? I'm just looking at it here: establish mandatory health and safety standards to minimize college athletes' risk of abuse, prevent players from being stuck paying sports-related medical expenses, increase graduation rates, protect educational opportunities and scholarships, prohibit universities from using a permanent injury suffered during athletics as a reason to reduce or eliminate a scholarship. So all of these things were designed to protect them within the college athletic industry. It really wasn't to share revenue, but it is now, because there is so much money in the pie, and the pie just gets larger and larger and larger.
But I would say, and I am on the board of the Knight Commission, I know Oliver is going to be joining us. The Knight Commission has been clear about this from the very beginning. The Knight Commission has time and time again identified the fact that taking care of the college athlete should be one of the primary goals in figuring out what we should do. And they've never said that we don't want to empower them and we don't want to pay them. But what they have been saying, which is exactly what has happened now, is that the structural issues that have occurred, the things that the NCAA ignored, and I agree, this is part of the problem. We as college presidents sit on those boards. We should have intervened a long while ago, because while you were paying the head of NCAA $4 million, you were arguing about not paying athletes. It's a bit of hypocrisy, and it got us down the wrong tunnel. So all of these things we should have been putting in place, we didn't put in place, and now we're forced to do revenue sharing. I get it, but I think the pendulum is going to swing, and once we get over, a little bit of the juice of the ready money, we are going to have to come back to a place where the more holistic approach about what you use the money for and how you use the revenue sharing for the holistic development of the athletes is obviously, I think, going to have to be where we win.
And I would be remiss if I didn't ask about Title IX. I know Ella Starowski, she has argued for a number of years that Title IX has been used as somewhat of a cudgel over this entire issue, and that, in fact, women's sports, Olympic sports by an extension, can be taken care of, can be preserved, given the amount of money that is out there. But we've scared the public into thinking that these sports are going to disappear if things continue as they are. I've always argued that the reason sports disappear is because of poor management out of the athletic department's office, and not because of, and not just because they are minor sports. Is that fair?
Kevin, I think that's a keen observation, but I really believe that right now we're in an existential moment. And the reason is the fact that there are no boundaries. There are no ways for us to really put some guardrails on. And if we can't do that, then the big revenue producers are going to continue to produce, but they're going to eat everything else. And that's the problem we have right now. And I know that I'm speaking to the converted here because I'm a convert myself, but I'm very concerned about the fairness in any of these settlements for women's sports and for the Olympic sports. we do stand a real chance until we can get, and Tom and I agree on this, until we can get a structural issue in place. It's about structure and culture, and it's about revenue. And we've got to make those two things parallel each other.
Well, let me just say this, because this isn't all that complicated. So Tom played in the NBA. I played in the NFL. I think we would both tell you that both of those leagues are uber competitive. They want to win, and they want to win, and they want to win. So what they have, which allows them to have two small market teams in the NBA Finals this past week, they've got a hard salary cap. You violate it, you're going to face the consequences. And they've got limited free agency. We have a soft as Charmin salary cap, and we've got a free agency that starts, it seems like every week, for young men and women to leave. So there's got to be some structure in that. Otherwise, we'll never get to a point where there's some level of competitive balance.
And so as you think about that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, having spent time in politics, first of all, I totally agree with Oliver on the lack of strictures in college sports, but the Title IX thing really concerns me because, I was there back in the 70s when what was being legislated, and I'm on the board of Maryland, and I say to our auditors, I say, we may have a huge Title IX liability down the road. I mean, right now you have an administration and a Congress that's not very sympathetic to Title IX, but that could flip entirely the other way. And if that happens, people are going to look at settlements. They're giving 20-some million and a couple million to women's sports and all the rest to men's sports. I think there's real risk there, and the risk could be even bigger than the House settlement if you look at it down the road. So, right now, this could go the other way so badly where colleges are stuck with a huge Title IX liability. And that's why, to Gordon's point, we need to figure out how to get our revenue situation better so we can solve these problems.
And when we say revenue situation, making it better, what does that mean? What's the model that you would use?
Right now there are 12 negotiators for college football. There's 10 of the conferences, the college football playoff, and Notre Dame. And the idea that I proposed in 91 and Senator Cantwell is proposing, take that down to one. So ESPN and Fox will not be jiggering with you. You're going to have one seller of the rights, just like the NFL. And the NFL let me give you an example. In the NBA has half the audience of college football, but gets twice the television money. Hockey has 7 times the money of college football, and it has a substantially less audience. So I think there's a lot of things that we need to do to correct the revenue side, but then we need to tie it to fundamental reforms, and that's the structure thing that I think Dr. Gee was talking about.
We've danced around a little bit. I am firmly in favor of changing the Broadcast Act of '61 to give some structure and to make certain we have an ability to be able to negotiate as one. Because unless we do that, we're going to continue to have this problem, and it's going to escalate. I think that there's no doubt about it. We need an antitrust protection.
Ooh, all right, antitrust. Oh, I hadn't brought that up, but go ahead, Dr. Frederick.
No, I was going to say, on the revenue thing, I think one of the things that I always hear in this conversation, and I actually just came from a meeting with the DC University presidents, and that includes Georgetown, GW, et cetera, and we had an entire conversation, nothing about athletics. But let me give you an interesting data point since you were talking about losses. My AD is here. My athletic department loses about $10 million a year, I believe. Graduation rate of my athletes is about 84%. I used to present that as a loss to my board. In June at my board meeting, I present that as an investment. because most of it is on scholarships. So not every university in the country is contributing to this, which is the other thing that I have to keep getting back to. The number of institutions we're talking about that is skewing this conversation is also why this is a very dangerous conversation. And I think what was said, and why getting one group negotiating the broadcast rights to fix the revenue and the structural problems is because it impacts all of us. My athletes don't leave here to go to another school to get a better graduation rate. They're going to leave here to go to another school to get a better NIL deal.
Right.
And so so even though the revenue issue is not mine, right now, or at least doesn't affect me in the same way, it's affecting all of us. And that's another reason why you should do it. So yes, you're 12 negotiators, but if you really go back and you look at the conferences, et cetera, you've got schools, the majority of schools are like mine, where we're not concerned about that. You see what I'm saying? And so I think fundamentally, another reason to fix it is because the larger landscape of what we're doing and what universities bring to college athletes is getting lost in the shuffle.
So if you could enact one thing tomorrow, what would it be?
One thing is tough. Give me two.
Granted.
All right, give me two. For state institutions, I would not allow coaches to make a certain multiple more than the highest employee.
Okay.
I just fundamentally would cap their salaries based on what the average state employee makes. So I'm not saying they need to make what a state employee makes,
Right.
but we should do it. Because I think if you take that money out of the coaching part of this, to some extent, some of the concerns we have in buying out people's, packages, it skews what we're doing. So that's one thing I'd do. And the second thing I would do is I would double down on any issue around graduation and the holistic management of the athlete. So whatever fundamentals you want to spend, you have to spend that same amount of money. What dollar for dollar, if we say the graduation rate on average needs to be at 90% or 95%, and you're going to spend all of this on equipment and buildings, et cetera, I want you to put the same amount of money into the holistic. So the health, mental health, following them for CTE, I want you to put the same amount dollar for dollar into that. So I'm a revenue guy. I like the fact that more money comes in. I just think that we're misspending it.
Okay. Oliver?
Applause, please, for Dr. Frederick. So I'll get to the answer, and I'll try to get there quickly. Gordon indicated that there's a need, and I think he's correct, for some sort of very narrow antitrust exemption. The other way to solve this challenge that we have is to do what professional sports has done, to have football players at the Power 4 schools or FBS schools, cut it wherever you want it, have football players or men's and women's basketball players be employees. I was taught in law school that an employment contract is good for both the employee and the employer. Morgan, golfer, Georgetown, Georgia, right? I think you would have been much better off had you had an actual employment contract when you faced potential retaliation. So have an employment, have your top athletes or top sports and be employees, allow them to unionize, as is the law in this country, and then collectively bargained. The professional sports leagues have done that, and I don't think anybody can tell any of us that that hasn't been good for the NFL, the NBA, MLS, Major League Baseball, you name it. The valuations are through the roof because there's labor certainty in those leagues, and they share. So that's the other option that we have as an entity. Many presidents, and I'll defer to Gordon and Dr. Frederick, many presidents don't want employees in the football building, 85 employees or basketball or whatever, but that's another pathway to get to labor certainty, because all of these lawsuits, right, that have been happening, they wouldn't take place because of the non-statutory labor exemption for all you lawyers out there. So that's another way to solve this problem. This isn't a time, the next 9 years, for half measures, I would argue, because we need to come up with a system that everybody can live with, and nobody's going to get all they want, right? It's a negotiation, but we need to come up with a system fairly soon, right? Because we're going down the pathway of just uncompetitiveness, and as you heard many of our student athletes say, bad behavior on the part of the athletic departments.
Well, I certainly agree with much of what you said. You went to the wrong law school. I would never, someone who says we ought to make everyone employees, but anyway, blessings on you, my friend.
That's the University of Texas Law School, Gordon, just so you know.
I know. Everything's bigger in Texas, but I think that we're both, all of us are talking about the same thing, which is the fact that if we go back to it, college athletics is so fundamentally important to the cultural and the idea of the American university. I mean, let's just think about that. The kind of spirit and enthusiasm and everything that happens around our college athletic programs, that is really the spirit of our universities and of our friends and everything else that is encountered. And as I point out, it also allows us to tell a story. I've never been able to get 110,000 people to come to a chemistry lecture. I can get them to come to a football game if we use it as a wise way to tell a story. So in this whole conversation, we're losing just the ability at the moment to really recount that notion of the special relationship. All we're trying to do is we're trying to get to a point. I don't want to have employees. I mean, I think that is a bridge too far. I'm not opposed to collective bargaining. Okay. In fact, I think that brings structure. But I think that the minute that we have employees, we cross that line of the spirit of what the institution is trying to achieve.
Okay. And Tom?
I think if Senator Cantwell was here, she'd say that, she didn't include it in her bill, this employment issue, because it is very controversial with Democrats and Republicans. Republicans don't want employment. A lot of Democrats do. A lot of that's being driven by labor unions and the like. So I think wisely she tabled that issue for now. I'm not sure I totally agree with Oliver, because it's hard to parse basketball, football players and say the rest of them aren't doing exactly the same thing, and you should be called employees and the others shouldn't. But it's a complicated issue. It does not need to be resolved today. We need to resolve the economic and structural issues. And I think we have an opportunity. I think in the next few weeks, there could be a real bipartisan package that includes some of the SCORE Act, some of this television consolidation, and we can actually get a bill done. It's been a long time since the college sports bill. There's only been 3 of them passed. 3 college sports bills since our bill passed in 1990. So it's a tough process, but I think we're reasonably close. And if we get that, that'll be a real step forward.
Is there one thing from those 3 bills that you think is critical?
Well, they include a lot of things. They kind of limit transfers. They make sure that, some of the things on, transfers, health and welfare standards for kids. We've talked about consolidation of television rights. There's a whole thing about regulating agents. The current legislation for agents is not up to speed. There's a whole host of things where there's bipartisan support to get a bill done, and I think that's going to be the challenge over the next couple of weeks. So.
All right, so in this short time that we've been sitting here, we've figured out how to fix everything, spend the same for the academy and athletics, cap coaches' salaries, employment contracts should be employed, collective bargaining should be a part of this, and consolidating broadcast rights. Thank you very much. We have figured it all out. Gentlemen, Oliver, Gordon, Dr. Frederick, Tom, thank you all very much. Thank you. Oh, sure, we can. All right, we got time for Q&A. Boom. Yeah, is there a mic? All right. Yep.
Okay. The Drake board knows me to be the big fan of college club sports, which have not been mentioned here at all. Let me give you an example from my own sport, swimming. U.S. Master Swimming, which I've been a member of since 1972, decided to help form an organization called College Club Swimming. College Club Swimming had already started some self-organization from a few different colleges, but we helped form a national organization. They sponsor regional and national competitions. There is an Ivy League club championship, just as there is an Ivy League varsity championship. What is nice about club swimming is, and the reason U.S. Masters decided to help it, as a funnel for new members of Master Swimming, because they felt that varsity swimmers are so burnt out and frequently suffer from rotator cuff injuries, which are unheard of among college club swimmers, who do not spend the same number of hours and yardage in the pools, and they have opportunities to do a lot of other extracurricular activities. They also are able to organize new events. They had a relay swim around Manhattan Island, for example, and they can be inventive that way. They have volunteer coaches, so there's no million-dollar coaches involved here. And there are a lot of advantages to this, and more students are seeing their way to do college club swimming as opposed to varsity, because they want to do many other things besides just their sport. So I just make that case, and I want you all to recognize that this exists and is growing in colleges around the country. So.
Thank you. Anyone else with a question?
So my question for the panel is, for those of us who are lawyers, we tend to look at the rules and the constraints that exist and how even some of the conversations today are about restricting or controlling it. I wanted to know what the panelists maybe thought about incentivizing the right acts. In other words, providing certain incentives for student athletes to remain in a single institution for 4 years, rather than telling them they have to. Incentivizing participating in playing inside those conferences and receiving good grades, or participating in the academic discourse on their campus, to incentivize that rather than placing the restrictions, to see how the student athletes, as we saw those earlier today, who want to be part of those institutions because it's their institution, it's their pride, their spirit. If they're incentivized to do those things as we view the student athlete, do you think that that would push the conversation along as opposed to providing rules and restrictions?
Yeah, you know, I definitely think it's something that we should look at. But one of the things I think that Gordon said earlier, and for any of you in the room who may not know this, but if you look up in Wikipedia, the most successful fundraising president in university history since they created the first university in America is Gordon Gee, just to put that on record. So I do want to be clear, though, that I think if you I think we can make some incentives, but Gordon made a very, very important point earlier, which is the more things we do that separate the student athlete from the rest of our student body, I think the more problems we create. And it continues to be an issue. And it's an issue that we didn't really discuss yet. It's not the panel to figure that out, but that's part of kind of the pervasive culture that has occurred. My son went to Duke for his freshman photo shoot in the fall before he started, and he happened to be on campus the same day as the freshman basketball team. I can assure you his experience was very different. But I also pointed out to him that his experience was very different if Kerry had recruited him to come to Howard. There wouldn't be any fall photo shoot day, right? But so I think we want to be careful. I like the idea of incentives. I just worry that the incentives in and of itself will continue to make the student athlete a very different person on a college campus, and that is part of what we're concerned about. It's not just the money, but how we're having them live, how we're having them participate in activities. I think we're taking away some of the social construct of the development. And to be quite honest, to get back to one of Kevin's earlier points, that's part of what we're not dealing with respect to what happens, especially with young black men. Let's be honest. We're putting them in a in a bit of a social milieu from which they haven't come, and we're expecting them to behave and have a certain outcome, but we're not putting anything else around them to assist them. So it's a little bit of a hypocrisy, right? And I think we have to be, that's all part of the issue. The more you isolate them, the more you have them not deal with the reality of what would usually happen, right? There's data even on rejection. 56% of high school seniors have not asked somebody else out on a date. So they don't know what rejection looks like. So by the time they get to college and they get that first F, they're pretty confused as to how to deal with that. But those are real things in our society that we're not looking at. We're taking the athlete and making the athlete a very, very extreme circumstance of what's happening currently in society.
The answer is at the moment, no, but that's a great idea.
And the Knight Commission actually has made some suggestions along those lines. Not the winning part, but the other things that you've mentioned.
In my 1991 bill, I put that in there so that schools that graduated their athletes would get more money. And so I do believe, as a matter of fact, I spoke to Charlie Baker when he took the NCAA job. I think it's very important that we reward graduation and we help these kids get on to the next step in their life. So philosophically, I'm supporting.
And currently, the NCAA does have some things that looks at that in terms of, our progression rates, et cetera. So the NCAA does have some, I would say, framework that does hold on to some of that, but not in the manner in which I think you described.
It's an accreditation issue. I think what you're talking about is really trying to tie those things absolutely together. And I think, and Tom's bill in, 1991, that was the closest we've come to that. Yeah,
that was
yeah.
90,
yeah, that's the closest we've come to that. But that needs to be part of the conversation. Well, that is an incentive, right?
Well, just so you know, most athletic directors have clauses, bonus clauses in their contracts based on success rate of graduation, APR, all that sort of stuff. And I imagine, I think coaches do as well. So it's already baked in on the campus side for those responsible for that.
Question. Testing. All right. So my question is, one of the reasons why the initial efforts to get Congress to agree on the NIL revenue share legislation was concern for the poorer institutions who were not able to afford medical services. And what I think every college president would agree to is a responsibility on the part of the institution to be responsible for athletic injury for some extended period of time. Why isn't the conversation about the Sports Broadcast Act and the new revenues it generates, why aren't we talking about doing that for all college athletes, for all institutions? And the concept being, we know what collective bargaining should yield. We know that. Why wouldn't that be guaranteed for athletes in lieu of collective bargaining?
Well, Donna, let me just say that I think that's where we're driving ourselves toward, but we're behind the curve right now. This is the problem. And until we can get some general agreement on some of these revenue enhancements, the structural issues are very difficult to get at. But I love the idea. I think that's exactly what we should be doing.
I do agree. I still think the worry is when we look at a few of the revenue streams skews this entire thing. I think for instance, we have a big problem. We've all agreed it's a big mess. If you take the college football playoff out of it, you have a very different construct. One that some of the things that people have mentioned, we probably could fit. And we just need to do something different there. And I think Oliver was alluding this to his analogy with football and basketball. And to be quite honest, I think if this continues going where it's going, it will have to evolve itself to the point where you take it out of it. But I think if you take college football playoff, specifically out of the equation looks very, very different. And a lot of these other things start fitting in, fairly safely.
Testing. Hello. My name's Teresa. I'm a doctoral student just up the street at GW. My question is sort of a little unique, and it's sort of like trickled down into more of the youth sports kind of conversation. I'm curious what you all's perspective might be on this. My graduating class is 2013 out of college, and so I feel like my, not necessarily generation, but cohort of youth athletes sort of came up through the works of like AAU and youth sports, playing at local community centers, right? Funded by our local government, community members. I think about the YMCA, the Boys and Girls Clubs. We talked about youth sports and private equity investing in that. And in my local community in Syracuse, New York, I have noticed the lack of community resources, specifically in those hubs where kids can go play, at various Pop Warner leagues and things of that nature. And so when we think about governance, I'm curious what you all's thoughts are around how legislation, how local communities, college campuses thinking about pipeline and their local communities. Monumental Sports just did a huge initiative throughout DC to empower more youth and kids getting involved in sports. But personally, I feel like those community center efforts, I've seen a lot of local places close down in Syracuse alone because of funding that the city can no longer provide. So just curious around what governance and sort of structuring that could look like, or what you all's perspectives are in that realm.
It's interesting. If you drove around DC, I think in the 60s and 70s, there was probably a baseball field on every corner. And you go around DC now, if you see kids playing baseball, call me, because I might have to go recruit those kids without a baseball team. It's very surprising to see, and you see that evaporate. But I think we have a fundamental responsibility. I don't know what that governance structure looks like, but he'll tell you. We have the only HBCU swimming team in all of college sports. And I will do everything to make sure that we don't give it up. Why? Because African Americans are 5 times more likely to drown than white Americans. So it's not only about sport, but as I met with them, they won their conference championship, I should add as well, so we don't have it as a hobby, just to be clear, we're competitive. But I say to them all the time, when they ask me what would I like to see them do, I would like to see them do more of what they do. I'd like to see them get more of us in the pool, more of us around safe swimming, etc. So I think there's a bigger construct that sports also plays that you're absolutely right. We've lost in the conversation and our duty to the community. The young people who live around here, they don't have access to a pool. They don't learn to swim. All things that could be beneficial. The older people who live around here could do with sports aerobics, right? Swimming aerobics. I talk to him and his coaches about that all the time. I want to give free swimming lessons to the people who live in this community because I think fundamentally our universities have always been part of the fabric of the society around us. And that is the other thing that gets skewed. So while 110,000 people may come to his games, I would challenge him, of that 110,000, how many of them feel the right type of loyalty to the community associated with the university and not just the football team that won a game? How many of those boosters are looking at what is happening to the people in that neighborhood and really investing in them? When Kerry came here, we didn't have midnight basketball, right? Those are things we invested in because we feel we have a fundamental opportunity for the community. And the last thing I would say is we're nowhere close. We have a middle school on our campus, and I will cherish the day that one of those kids leaves that middle school and starts on my basketball team. That's when I really know we're making change. Or one of the kids from right around here, one of these public high schools, is playing on that basketball team. Right now, all of this conversation is taking away that fabric of the community in terms of the role that we should play.
Just real quick, when I was sports minister under President Clinton, I always made this point. Smart countries in the world have a pyramid. They have less money at the top for elite sport and a lot of money at the bottom for grassroots sports. We have an inverted pyramid in America. So we're putting all this money at the top for elite sports, college sports, but we do very little at the bottom. And that is a national concern. It should concern all Americans, and it's much bigger than college sports, so I appreciate your sentiment on that.
As a former employee of an organization that took a single entity antitrust exemption case to the Supreme Court and got kicked 9-0, there was a discussion. Oliver mentioned that Dr. Gee is in favor of a limited antitrust exemption. How would you limit it such that it doesn't turn into a single entity for the NCAA, which is a whole lot less cohesive than my former employer, the NFL? By duration, by scope, what would you do?
You went to the wrong law school also. It was a 9-0 loss. I mean, what can I say? But I think the reason I'm in favor of the limited exemption is on the revenue side. I am very concerned because, and that's the reason I'm here. You know, I believe very much in what the Drake group is doing. I believe very much in what the Knight Commission is doing. But those we can't address that directly. Those cultural and social and structural issues until we get the revenue issues solved. It has just been thrust upon us, and so I call it a parallel approach. Yes, it has to be limited because we don't want to let Katie bar the door. One of the problems, and Oliver, of course, was there as part of this, as part of the NCAA. But one of the problems with the NCAA is the fact that it is a membership organization, and membership organizations can only do so much as long as the members are willing to let that happen. And that has always been the problem with the NCAA, is it has, 800, 1,000 members, but about 100 of them generate about 95% of the revenue, and that dysfunction is what the problem is. Yeah.
Thank you very much, and that concludes our final session of the day. I appreciate all of you for your time, your expertise. I know your time is very valuable, so we really appreciate you being here today. And I'd like to also thank the faculty and event management staff from the George Washington University who are of incredible help in managing this event. We really appreciate all of your hard work. And with those thanks, we end our nationally live-streamed coverage. Now we'll begin our networking and cocktail hour. The bar is at the back of the room. We hope you get a chance to meet and greet the amazing students here. We hope the students learned a lot by being here. And I hope everybody makes meaningful connections today. Again, we'd like to thank all of our moderators and panelists who generously donated their time to be here and share their expertise. And on behalf of the Drake Group Education Fund, thank you for coming, and we hope you enjoyed today's program.